Well, good morning, everybody. We're back. Hope you all enjoyed yesterday. Seemed like we had a lot of pretty good questions and comments and engagement from everybody, so we'll keep running this as long as you guys think it's helpful. Probably we'll do one today, and then just depends if we get a lot of snow and come back early from Knoxville or something. We may do one over the weekend, but definitely do one on next Thursday. Next Thursday, I want to do it on. I just realized how unorganized I am. I've been trying to find a few things that's been taking me forever. Tackle organization. A bunch of people have asked about that, and definitely that's something that needs to happen. So, yep, we'll be doing that one on next week. A lot of different people interested in a lot of different stuff. It was pretty cool yesterday. There were several people on here that just are getting into crappie fishing, and that really gets me fired up, is getting to share this with, my knowledge, my passion with these people who are just getting into the sport. And when you just get into crappie fishing, people think crappie fishing is pretty simple. Nah, we make it as complex as possible. So it's a lot of information to process, a lot of different techniques. So today we're going to spend our time discussing ways that let's keep the same format. So the problem, morning Monty, the problem we're going to address today is either I don't want to use Livescooe, I don't have it, I can't afford it, I don't think I like fishing like that, whatever your reason, targeting fish without forward-facing sonar. So, and a lot of people might think, well, that's going to make it more simple. If we just take all the electronics out of this, we're going to simplify the process. Actually, it's just the opposite. I'm probably going to complicate it more, because you're going to have to work a little bit harder. You're not going to be as focused into doing one particular thing. Like, let's say if you were going to fish the pre-spawn period, and we're going to talk about a lot of different patterns and stuff. I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning, just like we did yesterday, but I'm just letting some people get on here right now. If I went out there and pretty much knew what I was going to be doing, like with forward-facing sonar, I would be doing like chasing schools, casting that school and black crappie. And it's a pretty dominant pattern. If you got a lake that got a lot of blackfish in it in the spring, they're going to be schooling up in open water during the pre-spawn period. And pretty much I'm going to have one rod, pretty much what I showed you yesterday, that TCB, 2-pound test. I might have a couple different profiles tied on, but for the most part, I'm going to be doing one thing. So I'm just going to have a few boats in the rod. A few rods in the boat. Said that backwards. Hey, whoa. We got a celebrity on here today. Crappie Kirby. My man. Kirby and me have fished together a ton. And actually, since he's on here, I'm going to tell you, a lot of people are wanting to know about planter boards. And me and Kirby did one of the coolest shows a few years back on Del Hollow, and Denny catches one that weighed almost 3 pounds. We caught Denny's personal best. But that show was a great just tutorial on how to planter board fish. So as soon as I get off here, I'm going to post, morning Adam, I'm going to post a link to that show, because I'm not going to just spend an hour. I love planter board fishing, don't get me wrong, and I can spend 5 hours sitting here going over all the details on it. But that show is a perfect tutorial from everything from the knots, the rod, the technique, tying the knots, putting the boards out. We spent a lot of time really getting focused on, just teaching you how to do it. So I feel like if you watch that show and if you've never seen a planter board before, you can put the spread out. You should be able to go out there, and if you get around the fish, you should be successful. So I'll post a link to that as soon as I get off here, because I don't want to spend all the time. I'm going to try to give you guys as many solutions to the problem of how do we fish and we take the cheater box away. But I'm going to give you my takes on it. So like for my first couple years, what's up there, Wes Meyer? For the first couple years of guiding, I didn't have Livescooe. It was just getting started, and I wanted to, get established. So, but especially that first year, I couldn't target them year round like I am now. So the Livescooe has definitely given me the ability to guide clients 12 months out of the year. Didn't have that before, but what I did have were certain windows and certain patterns that were really, really, really good. So I would really stack as many trips as I could during those times. And so I'm going to go through. We're going to start it off. We're going to go back to like kind of what we did yesterday, talking about. First thing you need to understand is most of the knowledge I'm going to be throwing at you is relating to black crappie. But let's talk about like some other differences. We talked about differences in black crappie and white crappie yesterday, but we're moving into the pre-spawn pattern, and that's where we're probably going to spend the bulk of this on, because this is a time where you can target crappie in the pre-spawn pattern without forward-facing sonar. So there's ways to do it, and I'm going to give you some solutions to that. But let's just talk about, you got to understand whether you're fishing black crappie or white crappie. Now, Kirby's out there in Kansas. He's primarily fishing white crappie. And the one thing you got to realize is these things spawn at different times. So black crappie will generally spawn earlier and at a lower water temperature than versus a white crappie that's going to spawn a little bit later. So a lot of times, like my fish are going to probably, on Dale Hollow, these blacks are probably going to spawn. Also, it depends what part of the country you're in too. But my crappie are probably going to spawn first, second week of April. I have seen them go to the banks as early as the last week of March. You know, it's just a lot of it's weather dependent, temperature dependent. I don't think, everybody's like, well, what is the magic temperature they go spawn? I don't think there really is one. I think a lot of stuff is like a trend. Like when you get, it's not necessarily if it has to get to a certain temperature, but if you got 5 or 6 days of like 80 degrees in your water, maybe sub, but they're gonna be realizing that the fish are gonna notice, the water's warming really, really fast. We're just gonna go ahead and go, and they may go a week or two earlier than what people think. So I'm not a big proponent of, just sitting there, trying to just pick on a mat, like on a calendar, and said, okay, this is when I'm gonna set my trip up and I'm gonna do this. You got to read the conditions real time, and these, and you kind of a lot of times just got to go through the progressions and see what's going on, read the conditions. And sometimes, I've seen fish spawn when they shouldn't be, and I've seen fish not spawn and hold all the way out until, they should have spawned a month ago. So it's every year is different. The conditions are always different. There's a lot of variables. But all right, let's kind of get into it. We got a bunch of people on here now. Let's just talk about the different phases or the different patterns throughout the year. And I'm going to start with basically we have what's called the pre-spawn period, and then we have the spawn, and then we have the post-spawn. And I kind of divide the post-spawn into like an early post-spawn, late post-spawn. Then I'm going to call the summer pattern is after that, and then we go into the fall pattern, and then the winter, and then we just circle back around. So we're kind of in the winter pattern right now, but like moving into the pre-spawn. The pre-spawn is when, my opinion is, this is one of my favorite times of year to guide. I've really gotten to where I like the post-spawn too, but so pre-spawn, the fish are staging. So a lot of the year, once we get outside of this, we're looking for bait fish. You find the bait, you find the fish. And you can find bait really easily with 2D sonar, side imaging. You don't have to have Livescooe to do that. But so during the pre-spawn though, like a lot of the lakeside fish, like on Dale Hollow and Cumberland both, they're not really relating to bait that much. The big females, what they're trying to do is soak in as much radiation and get their body temperature, like from the heat, from the sunlight, and trying to warm their internal body temperature up to a certain temperature where they can go up and lay those eggs. So they really just want to get rid of those eggs. So a lot of times I don't even pay attention to, bait fish. That doesn't mean that there are a lot of times, they're gonna migrate towards the warmest water, and a lot of times there is bait there because the bait fish kind of do a lot of the same things. So, but they're not necessarily and they could be feeding on them or not, but a lot of times you get just fish just out there suspending in open water in certain areas. And back to the differences in black crappie and white crappie, white crappie are much more prone to be in singles. They'll be in like a scattered area. They'll be an area and it's got a bunch of fish, but they're not going to be in a real tight school. Versus your black crappie are very prone to school, where they'll have, upwards of 200, 300, 500 fish in one school. And, the more those fish get pressured, the kind of tighter up they get in that school. And they kind of get like in that, it seems like penguins, how they're just getting like a ball and they all face nose in. That's kind of what happens when they get a lot of pressure and they're in schools. But, schooling crappie are pretty much a norm for black crappie lakes versus, white crappie, like down, let's talk about like Mississippi. You got muddy water, but you got primarily, there is some black crappie down there, but primarily these are big white crappie, and they're more of a solitary creature, but they're going to be in like the same kind of areas, but they're going to be a single target. So usually black crappie going to be in a school, white crappie going to be singled up, and that's got its challenges. Makes targeting those single fish a lot easier with Livescooe. So, but if they're uniformly scattered enough, trolling techniques will work. So we got the pre-spawn. This is what we'll spend a bulk of our time talking about this. But when I first started guiding without Livescooe, this was when I booked as many trips as I could, because I kind of got ahead of everybody on this. And so if you're not going to use Livescooe and the fish are not on structure, you're going to have to cover water, and you need a technique that's going to, make you be successful. So this is kind of where I started hinting at, well, just because we're taking Livescooe out of the picture isn't going to make like this an easier process, or not easier, but simplified. Because now, if you're going to try and cover water and find these fish in open water, a multiple pole technique is your friend here. So, typically speaking, black crappie are very good. These good black crappie lakes, like historically like a Weiss Lake. Kentucky Lake was good. Had black crappie and white crappie was a big lake, for longline trolling and spider rigging. But these multiple pole techniques allow you to cover a lot of water, and be successful in the spring. So when I first started guiding on Dale, when I first started learning how to fish in the pre-spawn period. Actually, I went down to Weiss Lake, and me and my brother, I went fish a tournament down there. And the whole point of this, to going down there, was to learn two techniques. I wanted to learn how to shoot docks, because none of these lakes had to do that, which, that was fun. But it's not really applicable to the lakes up here. But then you've got, but I really wanted to learn that long line trolling technique. And we did, and learned a lot of lessons down there. And then I brought that back up here, and turned out, doesn't work on Cumberland at all. I can't explain it why, but the only way I can explain it is, it turned out it worked on Dale Hollow really well, did not work on Cumberland. The only difference in the two lakes, they got the same bait fish, they're pretty deep, they're clear, there are a lot of similarities, but hey, Joe, the big difference that I found was Cumberland is full of stripers and Dale Hollow has 0 stripers. So I feel like the presence of an alpha top line predator bigger than the crappie tend to keep these fish tighter to structure, closer to the banks, and not getting out there in open water where a school of 10,000, stripers can train wreck them. Because I kind of feel like on Dale Hollow versus you got these big schools of these, 2 pound plus. It's nothing to find a school of 200-300 2 pound plus black crappie in a school on Dale Hollow. I kind of like equate it to like, I feel like the crappie is kind of like a biker gang. They're like the Hells Angels of Dale Hollow. Nothing out there, a 2.5, 3 pound crappie doesn't have a predator. There's a muskie or two down there, but they're not enough to matter. But those things, they don't fear anything. The only thing they got to worry about is this guy or you guys. We're the alpha predator that they have to worry about. But as far as in the fish department, they're going to rule the open waters. Nothing's going to mess with a school of 3 pound crappie. They can sit there and eat. They can eat whatever size bait they want. They can have their pick of the shad. They're gonna. Yeah, Brandon, stripers, they are a pain, but they're part of our life. But yeah, so think about that is crappie on Dale, they don't really have a predator, so they behave differently. So A lot of the information I'm giving you is based on mainly like 2 or 3 lakes. So there's going to be a lot of lake specific, you can't really just sit there and extrapolate what I'm saying to every lake. You could, it'll fit a lot of lakes, but just kind of understand that each lake's got its own personality. The patterns are going to be different. What works on one lake, there's no guarantee that it's going to work on another. There's a good chance that it could, but you just got to understand that like trolling techniques on Cumberland really don't work very good. So, but that's another thing though. So, in general, the crappie on Cumberland are more bank related. That's actually good for you guys wanting to target them without forward-facing sonar. They're going to be more structure related. So if your idea, if you want to fish the banks and cast at laydowns and stuff in the spring, don't schedule a trip. Don't schedule your annual spring trip on Dale Hollow. You're going to come down there and you're going to get aggravated and you're not going to have much success because you're going to want to do what you want to do. Try to pick a lake where you think it's going to work better. And I'm going to tell you that Cumberland has got comparable sized fish, and those fish will be on a complete different pre-spawn pattern, and you'll have more success on a lake like Cumberland if you want to do it without Livescooe than you will on Dale where they're more in open water. But Dale can be but if you want to troll, then just the opposite. If you want to troll without Livescooe, and like I said, this is the pre-spawn pattern I really like. And that's the time of year where I don't even have to turn it on if I don't want to. I leave it on a lot of times just to kind of watch and look for schools as I'm trolling around, but it doesn't help me at all. So sometimes it'll help me like look the exact, depth of the fish so I can really tune my presentation in. But for the most part, if I see a fish at 8 foot, I know exactly how to get my baits where they need to be. So, trolling. So we got long line trolling, and then you got planter board, you got crankbaits. I would steer clear of fishing crankbaits in the pre-spawn pattern. Some people do really well with it, but it typically works better on white crappie. They're more apt to, they get a bigger mouth. I just think that they're more apt to eat crankbait. I know there's some guys on Dale that, do well trolling crankbaits. I personally think they'll bite a jig or a fin spin like 2 to 1. I'll talk about some different profiles and different things later, but I still think, if you want to be successful on a pre-spawn period, like on a lake like Dale Hollow, you probably want to troll. In multiple poles. In this case, more poles is better. You want to be able to cover ground. Planter boards allow you to do that. I don't know if you guys know what a planter board is. Like I said, I'm going to put a video up there that'll really explain everything, but this is an example of a planter board. Basically, the whole point of this is to just get the bait out away from the boat. So in this fish in clear water, I'm gonna tell you this story. I tell everybody this on a guide trip. When I first came up with this planter board idea, it wasn't my idea. I saw it down at Weiss Lake on that same tournament, and there were these guys using it they were in a little channel, and in a place called Mud Creek at Weiss Lake, and this is a notorious, if you want to tear your trolling motor off your boat, it's the perfect creek to do it. I mean, it's just got stumps everywhere. But there's couple little channels, and you got to stay in them. But there was this row of stumps outside of that channel you couldn't get over to. Well, these guys had figured out, they figured out a better mousetrap. They used that little planter board and they put a minnow and a split shot behind it, but they could get that, and it was just a few foot deep, but they could get those baits over there and still slow troll along those stumps and did really well with that. Well, I saw that and I'm like, God, that's a pretty good idea. I got to thinking, all the striper fishing on Lake Cumberland, they're basically pulling planter boards. So I'm like, it's going to work for crappie over there. All I did was catch a bunch of little Kentucky bass, get mad. I sit there and I put those things up in a storage compartment in my front of my boat for about 7 years before they ever saw the daylight again. So fast forward, it turned out that the long line trolling I learned down there at Weiss, I brought that back to Dale Hollow, and it was very effective. But what I couldn't figure out is, there's certain areas when they're pre-spawn, you might have like a 2 or 3 mile stretch, and there's just a lot of fish around in these certain areas. Usually it's like in the last deep water of a creek or like a river, of the upper end of a lake in the river system. They're going to stage in that last 20, 30 foot water, and then, just kind of sit there until the conditions get right. Then they're going to shoot up to the banks or run all the way up the creek or the river. They'll do a little bit of everything. You never know exactly what they're going to do, but they're going to be in that pattern usually for somewhere to 4 to 8 weeks out there, and you can get at them if you know how to do it. So anyway, it was funny. I found if I got out there, if I was the first boat out there, I would make this same pass every day, and right at daylight, and I'd make this one pass, and I would catch 15 big ones. And when I would turn, by the time I made that pass and turn around, I looked, there was like 20, 25 boats out there, and it would take me the entire day until about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, almost till dark, to catch the other 15 fish. I'm like, but I caught, in 30 minutes, I caught 15. I used to think it was just an early morning bite. I got to thinking, as those fish, they're not going to go anywhere, but it's funny because you would graph them first thing in the morning, and then you wouldn't hardly see just a scattered fish here and there just on the 2D sonar. And finally, I'm ashamed to admit it took me like a couple of years to figure out. I'm like, these fish, they're still here. I'm not seeing them, but they're still here. What are they doing? Well, they're getting boat shy. So basically, they're just spooking out from the boat, and I couldn't see them under the graph. And I got to thinking, these fish, you dummy, you have the perfect technique right up. You had the perfect tool for the job right up there and that's not seen daylight in like 7 years. I put that planter board on that first time, and I never got more than 2 lines out. And this is like in the middle of the day. I'm like, from then on, I've never traditional long lined anymore. I went straight to pulling boards all the time. But Rick Hayes was on here yesterday, and he commented about wanting to talk about the different lengths of rods. So basically, when you're long line trolling, you're putting a specific amount of line out, and whether it be with a planter board or not, and you certain jigs, weight of jig to basically get your bait to a specific depth, where it's at, and then you want to use your electronics, or if you don't even have electronics, you can do it. You can just put you can set lines at different depths, and then you figure out which depth they're getting bit at, and then to shallow them above that. So you can do it without electronics too. It's just going to take you more time. But but it turns out when I went to the planter boards and got my baits out away from the boat, then that made all the difference in the world. So that was like the first really big thing, and that happened a couple years before I started guiding, and then I was the only one doing it down there. So I had pretty good. I had the market cornered there for a while. It was pretty sweet. But but basically you put the line out, you put jigs out, different colors, and it's very specific. But you got the number one thing, just like we talked about yesterday, though, is the cardinal sin when doing any kind of trolling technique is letting your bait get either below the fish or even at the level of the fish. You have to keep it above them. So you got to understand. So there's different charts and apps like Precision Trolling makes an app, where you can, it's got different, line sizes and weights and different things that it's going to give you in the ballpark. But yeah, so you basically got to understand how to get your bait, and there's a lot of more art than science there. But yeah, when you're trolling, but basically same thing like when we're talking about presenting a bait to the fish yesterday. There's a certain area where that fish is looking, and the same thing. So you just got to make sure your baits are above the fish. If you've got good water clarity, they'll come up 2, 3, 4, 5 foot above it. So as long as you're shallower than the fish, you're safe. But if you're 1 inch too deep, you're dead. So typically speaking, if you're catching fish and then you immediately quit catching them, and you're like, well, they just quit biting. Time to go home, guys. The bite's over. Nah, that's not what happened. They went up or down in the water column. Most likely, if it's throughout the day, they raised up They raised up higher, and you're pulling below them. So if you're catching fish when you first start, and then you quit catching them, and you feel confident, there's fish are not really making big moves that time of year. That once they kind of get in a pattern or an area where they're at, they're going up and down in the water column, but they're not running. They're not going to run 5 miles up the river, until it's time to spawn. There's a certain time where they're going to make a big move, and they're going to do it overnight. But in generally speaking, once they get in an area, they're going to stay there. So but throughout the day, they're going to go up and down in the water column. And typically speaking, as the sun comes up, more of these fish are going to, when the water's, in the low 50s, they're going to spawn when it gets up there in that range closer to 60. But as the water warms up throughout the day, those fish are typically going to rise. So you're going to need to keep, you need to be like a computer, just figuring in these variables and it continually adjusting. The guys that really struggle are the guys that don't want to sit there and adjust and make the moves throughout the day. So if you find, let's say you put your spread out and you bam, you caught 3 fish in the first 5 minutes. And then magically you went an hour and a half and you didn't catch anything. And you see other people around you catching fish. I mean, right there, I can tell you, you're too deep. Shallow up. Keep going shallower, or adjust things like that. So that's one of the best tips I can give you when you're trolling is don't just get stuck in and just leave them where they're at. Keep moving your depths up and down, and you're eventually gonna, something's gonna click, and you're gonna start catching them, and then find out exactly what it's like, well, that's my lucky rod. It's not lucky. Something's different about that rod on whatever you've got, either the amount of line, size jig, color, profile. Something's different about that one. If that one's getting bit, you got to figure out what's different about that than the other 6 rods in your spread. And, then once you figure out, then you fine tune your presentation down on that, and then you're going to be, it's no longer fishing, then you're catching. And that's the goal, is to always be catching instead of just fishing. Fishing's fun. Catching's really fun. When I'm doing any kind of trolling or springtime technique like that, typically speaking, 4-pound test is what I use. I never go heavier than that. There's no reason. I mean, so line, a lot of people want to know what kind of line I'm using. I love this SOS line from Crappie Magnet, Leland Lures. This spool right here is a 6,700 yard spool. And I love this. I love the big spools. They go on your line easier. They go on your reel easier. But the thing is, this is $40 retail. $40 for 6,700 yards. If you're going to get in the trolling game, I'm going to tell you something. There's no way around this. You're going to have to learn. You're going to have to learn how to deal with line twist. And there's no good way to deal with them. The best way to deal with line twist is when you start having too many twists, pull all the line off and put new line on. At that price, you can put new line on every 3-4 days. And if you're fishing a lot, and especially like if you're trolling through trash and different things like that, or catching a lot of small fish that are going to helicopter, you're going to get line twist. There's just no way around it. And when it gets to where it just becomes too big of a problem, I just put new line on. So it's nothing for me to put line on 3 times a week if I'm running 7 trips, because I hate dealing with line twists. Gary wants to know how to adjust depth. A couple different ways, Gary. Typically speaking, when I'm trolling, I'm going to go around 1 mile an hour. If the water temperatures are in the low 50s or below 50, I'm going to go 0.8 to 1, really 0.9 to 1. But 1.0 is your kind of magic, just kind of your reference point. As the water warms up more and the fish get more aggressive, you can go in the 1.0 to 1.2 spectrum. But typically speaking, 0.8 to 1.2 is where I'm going to be at in the pre-spawn period. And so the faster you go, the higher your baits are going to go. So if you up at 1.2, it's going to, your bait's going to run a foot or two shallower than they are at 0.8. So you can do that. You can speed up. The length of line is probably the main determinant. That in the weight of the jigs. So the length of line is, if you think you're too deep, put less line out. So the further the cast you make, and if you're pulling a planter board, it's the line behind the board, not how far you have the board out. That line doesn't factor into the equation. It's the amount of line behind the planter board is going to be that major determinant. And then we got size of weight of jigs. So if you got 16th ounce versus 8 ounce, typically speaking, if you want to just simplify, I like in the pre-spawn period, I like to pull double 16ths. So I'm going to show you how to tie a double rig here in a minute. 2 16th ounce, about this far apart, a foot and a half, 2 foot apart. I like having 2 baits out there versus 1. But if the fish are really shallow, and let's say going to be like less than 5 foot, then I'm probably going to just cut that bottom jig off and go. I like starting off with double rigs because I can always cut that bottom one off and I'm already at a single. But instead, if I start off at a single, I can't go to a double without retying the whole rig. But I can make a really quick adjustment if I want to. Let's say I'm pulling doubles and I quit getting bit, and I can't, and I suspect they might be. What I might do is I might just cut off the bottom jig on 2 rods, one on each side, and then put it out there, and then boom, boom. If that gets bit, then I know, cut them all off. So pay attention to what the fish tell you. Don't be hard-headed. Don't waste time, continually. That's the fun part about trolling. It's not just lazy fishing, or some people say it's not even fishing. I totally 100% disagree with that. You really got to, it's a chess match. You got to sit there, and what you're trying to do is isolate variables that really matter on that given day. And then once you figure out that once you put together the speed, either the single jig or the double jig, the profile and the color. And once you figure out like the magic combination, put everything on that combination and then just whack them and get done and get back to the house. That's basically what I do every day. I'm sit there, I start with the standard kind of searcher spread. I'll put a bunch of different colors out. I'll have them at different depths, and then I see what gets bit. And then I start refining my technique throughout the day until I can sit there. Once I've got the speed, once I've got the profile, once I've got the color, if I can put those 3 things together and find out the perfect speed, perfect profile, perfect color, it's going to get ugly. And I'm going to get, it's only going to take, once you put everything together and get in the right area, it's got them. It's not just, at that point, you're not just catching 1 fish at a time. You're catching 2 and 3 at a time, and it doesn't take very long at all. Greg Jansen's on here. Greg and Barb, his wife, we had one of the coolest days ever, and I forget how big. I mean, her and Barb and Greg were trading PBs, and of course she always catches the biggest one. Greg knows that, but he gave her a run for the money that day, and we had some fish, in the 2.7, 2.8 range, and we just got on once I got the deal dialed in and we got on them, it was crazy, and it was windy. I mean, that's another thing. So a lot of times trolling is your friend in these adverse conditions, because it's so much easier to control a boat when it's moving. So when you're growing at a particular speed, it's a whole lot easier than trying to hold still. It's just keep on a line and pull. Now, sometimes the wind can I've caught, double limits out there. A couple years ago, we had a day where it was 55-mile-an-hour wind. When the trees were snapping off at the top of the ridge, I told the guys it's probably about time we get in, and they had this massive windstorm. And, I tried to get home that day, and the roads were even closed because of the trees. But we went out there and hammered double limits and had, 10, 12 fish over 2 pounds, So there's still a way, but it's tricky. Sometimes you'll have to go. Sometimes it's too much wind to go into it, and there's too much to go with it behind your back. The whole deal when I'm trolling is trying to get down to that perfect speed, and there's different ways you can accomplish that. Sometimes you have to go sideways across the creek, but whatever you have to do to get that speed, perfect speed, which is going to allow your baits to get to that perfect depth, just right above those fish. That's what you got to do. So. Now, we talked about the pre-spawn. Like I said, I'm going to put 2 different shows up there. I'll put links to them on my Facebook page here right when we get done. Hey, Greg, that was a fun day. I might see if I've got some of those videos of Barb catching those fish. I think I'll put those up too for everybody to look at. So there's going to be a brush pile fishing episode, and then the episode with me and Kirby, and both on planter boards, and they're both really informative. Like, I just take you through the whole process of exactly what we do. So if you watch those 2, I feel like you should have a pretty good handle on trolling. So I'm going to kind of leave planter board. I'm going to leave the pre-spawn there. I think your best shot, like on a lake like Dale Hollow, is going to be this fish are most likely going to be in open water. It's going to be some kind of multiple pole. Now, there's people out there that will go and spider rig those same fish. They will not be too awful effective on Dale, but they will catch a few, especially in the early pre-spawn pattern, like when those fish are more in that like 15 to 20 foot range. Typically speaking, I really want to target fish like pulling boards or long lining when they're in the top 10 foot of the water column. So that's important. So the higher those fish are up, those are the active fish. Typically speaking, in the pre-spawn, on Dale in particular, the black crappie are going to be 2 levels. You're going to have a level up high, and there's going to be less of these fish. But usually, I'm really trying to find an area that's got fish suspended in the top 10 foot of the water column. But you're also going to see this big layer of bait, and it's going to have fish in it down here at 15 and 20. You'll see this on your 2D sonar or your side imaging. You don't have to have Livescooe to see this stuff. But those fish at the bottom are going to be in that still kind of dormant, non-active. I don't even look at those. Basically, what I do is I'll take my hand and cover that part, the bottom part of the graph, and I'll just cover it. The only thing I'm looking for is that top, that top 12, 10. I mean, sometimes I can catch fish as deep as 12 foot, but really if they're going to be active enough to run a jig down going a mile an hour, they need to be in that top 10 foot of the water column. So I'm only looking at that top section. I'm not even worried about it. That's a good tip. Focus on the fish you can catch and just ignore the ones you can't. Doesn't matter if there's 10 million of them down there and you can't catch them. Don't worry about them. Worry about the 1% or the 10% that's up here high. Because even let's say there's 10,000 fish down there and there's 1% up high. Well, 1% of 10,000 is still a lot of fish, and you only need to catch 30 of them. But if you can sit there and catch every one of them ones up high, it does not take that long. So even if there's less fish, focus on the ones you can catch. Don't worry about the ones you can't. So stay on point here on ways to be effective. Your very most effective pattern you can fish without Livescooe is during the spawn. Personally, I hate the spawn. I avoid it at all costs. I try not to even guide during it. But if you're a non-Livescooe angler, this is your Super Bowl, because the shallow water and it negates the Livescooe. You can't hardly see these shallow fish that are that are just right on the bank, and all the brushiest little stuff you can get, a little buck brush or and you got real shallow laydowns and stuff. You're not going to see those fish. So Livescooe really doesn't help you. So the really good shallow water anglers, they're not even messing with it. They don't have it. They don't use it. So this is your time to shine. The problem with the spawn, and it's really lake dependent. Like on Dale Hollow, I can tell you, somewhere in April, I'm gonna have some of the most red hot fish, and I'm like, man, I'm pretty good at this. I got this figured out. And then I'm gonna get a wake up call. When it gets really, really good, that's when I get nervous, because what's gonna happen is it's gonna go overnight. I'm gonna go from catching limits by 11 o'clock to like catching 2 fish. I mean, it's gonna come to a screeching halt, and you don't know what's gonna happen. You just hope you get as many days as you can before it happens. But when that happens, is those fish, when they go to the bank on Dale, they go to the bank, and right then and there, I can't. The pre-spawn bite, that's done. Sometimes you can, if they all come back. Usually they don't. They might all go to the banks, but then a lot of times they might on Dale, they might only be up there 2 or 3 days, and then they just disappear and are gone. I have a lot less luck catching them after they pulled back out immediately. I really don't know where they go. Sometimes I can find them, sometimes I can't. But typically speaking, my best fishing, is before the spawn. But doesn't mean you can catch. I mean, you can catch a blue million of them if you get on that right little spot there. And the only way to do that, that's when you're shallow water guys. They're and historically. So there's a couple good ways to target those fish if when they're spawning. If you're in Ohio, you know what these things are. Well, this is a really good version. This is Stan's, the little PBS Mini, but this is for a jig and a cork. So typically speaking, you want to get that bait and you're fishing like a foot deep, around right on the bank, and you're just dipping that around, and that just keeps that. If you're casting, you're going to stay. You're going to stay hung up all the time. So a lot of times it's really good to use like a longer rod or pitch this around, and you just kind of jiggle it. But it just keeps it up off the bottom and keeps them getting hung. and it's a very effective way to catch spawning crappie is with like just putting a small jig, either a 30-second is very popular. Usually most people would never go more than like a 16th. And you know, there's different profiles that work on that. A lot of people, this is when you would just use it's like a original crappie magnet. You could use a Popeye. You can use lots of different, you know, a lot of it will depend on whether you're targeting black crappie or white crappie. In general speaking, during the spawn, if I was targeting whites, I would use a bigger profile, like something like a slab magnet. But if I was targeting, you know, black crappie, I'd probably either do crappie magnet or even trout magnet or Popeye jig, something like that. So typically speaking, you never want to discount the importance of knowing what you're really targeting. And the other thing is your black crappie will usually, by about the time your black crappie are finishing spawning, then your white crappie are spawning. So if you've got a lake that's got a big population of both, let's say like Green River. Green River's starting to get more black crappie, but it's got a ton of white crappie. Let me think like a lake like Watts Bar. Fished Watts Bar last year, loved the lake. I called it Lake X. I was kind of playing with people last year because I didn't really tell them what it was. But a phenomenal fishery. My buddy Caleb guys down there, and that lake it's got like Grenada-sized whites, and then like the blacks aren't quite as big as like Cumberland and Dale, but they're really, I mean, a lot of like 1.5 pound, 1.75 pound fish, which are nice fish. I mean, I don't care where you're at; those are fun. I don't think we caught any blacks. Maybe caught one right at 2 pounds. I ran like 3 weeks of trips down there last year. I really like it though. But on the same day, I could target. It was funny. I was targeting black crappie that were spawning on brush piles with slip bobbers, and then on the same day, I was going out and pulling boards on pre-spawn giant white crappie that were out there just staging still. That was pretty cool. I was getting the fish. There was some fish spawning on these brush piles, and they were pretty easy to catch, and we'd catch a bunch of them and real fast, and they were blacks. They weren't quite as big. And then once we got close to the limit, then we would put the boards out and target, you know, suspending white crappie, and those were, I mean, like, you know, getting close to pushing 3 pounds, some of them. I did catch a 3-pounder over there. So, yeah, that was pretty cool. So, you know, black crappie are going to spawn at the lower temperature, and then usually about the time their spawns get over, then the whites will spawn. So, some lakes you got really good opportunity to fish them both. So, it's just another thing to think about. 4 pound test. I don't care what I'm doing in the spring. That's pretty much what I'm throwing in, unless I'm casting. If I'm casting small stuff at schools, then I'm still gonna be using a TCB and 2 pound. So spawn, that's when you really, you want to fish if you're not going to use live scope, because you negate the live scope, and a lot of the guys out there, they're going to quit. The guys that have been out there chasing schools or chasing singles, they don't really want to go mess with those fish on the bank. So this is when if you got a kayak, that's a great time to fish a kayak. If you want to get, like, if you go down south, and like, there's a lot of lakes where you can have really good wade fishing. You don't even have to have a boat. So if you're a bank angler, that's when you really want to sit there and get excited, is during the spawn. The fish are going to be positioned closest to the bank. You're going to have accessibility to them during that pre-spawn period. So, I mean, spawning period. So for the guys who don't have a boat, have a kayak, stuff like that, this is when you realize you just want to make hay. And I would spend the most of your time during the spawn period. Then we go to the post-spawn. Typically in a post-spawn, there is a good way to target them. And once again, that's going to be a trolling technique. Yeah, post-spawn, sometimes some lakes still get on kind of like structure, and you might do okay with that, casting the trees and stuff, but not really. You're going to struggle there for the most part, especially if you're not using forward-facing sonar. So fish are going to be really the structure. So those fish during the pre-spawn and spawn, they haven't eaten a whole lot. That post-spawn period, now we're worried about getting fat. We're starving, they spawned, everything's done. Now all we're worried about is eating. Now this is the time where you look for bait. The bait is the structure. So you just got to go and find these areas that have the bait. And and during the early post-spawn, like, May and June, if you find the bait, there's going to be crappie out there. because they're hungry and they will take, that's when I get to like upsize my presentation. So I really like that. So I'm going to troll still and cover water, because you're going to have areas where there's a lot of bait and a lot of fish, and then you might go miles and miles and nothing until you hit the other. But once you get on that area, you can really work it. But this is called a slab curly. It's kind of got like a shad body and a curly tail. When I get into that post spawn, I'm basically trolling that bait, and I can upsize the presentation. That, the water's warmer then, the fish's metabolism higher. They're gonna, even the black crappie are gonna take like a bait like normally just a white crappie would eat. So really like that post spawn period. Summer, you're gonna have a hard time with Livescooe in the summer pattern, unless, one exception, if you're gonna really target fish in the summer pattern and you don't have forward facing sonar, you better be good at sinking brush. So like my tournament partner, David Jones, great dude, guys over on Green River. David he didn't even fish in the wintertime. There was great fishing over there. He would put 200 to 400 brush piles out every year. And you just got to have spots. And you got to have enough structure. You got to have lots of different kinds of structure. And you just got to have enough spots out there to where, because those fish are going to be moving as that thermocline sets up. So they're only going to be at certain places for just a while. It's not like you can't just fish the same brush pile all year. That brush pile might only be good for 2 weeks. Now, it may be really good for that 2 weeks, but then you better have something out deeper or in a different area where they're moving to go to after that kind of deal dries up. So if you're going to fish the summer without forward-facing sonar in the summer pattern, and the summer's a great time to catch crappie, don't get me wrong, that's some of my most consistent guiding, but it's not really the part of catching them, it's finding them, and it's that needle in the haystack. So I'm going to recommend that you get really good at sinking brush, and that means not sinking it just right when you plan on fishing it. I'm saying like all winter long, you better be putting brush out at certain different depths and different areas, and then eventually, the problem with that, and there's a lot less people putting brush out before, because the guys that have forward-facing sonar are going to have a huge advantage over you now, because they can sit there and run 150 brush piles in a day and just shine that Livescooe on them and say they're not there, or they're small, or those are bluegill. They're going to be able to cover that water 100 times faster than you are without, because they don't have to. I can pull up, put that Livescooe on that pile. I mean, I can, even if I've got all this. I mean, I've got like 5,000 waypoints. And, I may need to cover 200 of them before I find the right stuff. But I can do that very fast and efficiently, versus when you don't have, if you're not going to use forward-facing sonar, you're going to have to fish it to find out. Well, that's going to take you 15 to 30 minutes each spot you go. So you might only be able to fish 10 spots a day or 20 spots a day, versus somebody's going to be able to fish 150 if they're going to fish fast. So summertime, there is I'll give you another little pattern that you could be very successful in the summer. A lot of people don't like it, but I'm gonna tell you, it's very effective. Fishing at night, putting out a green light or like floating lights, that can be, so you're putting the odds in your favor. So basically you go out at night, you anchor up off a point or in an area where you're pretty sure there's fish around, and you put that light out, you pull the bait in, so you're bringing the fish to you. So instead of you having to go out there and chase the fish, you're bringing the fish to you. I used to do this a lot. I'm too old to stay up all night now. Basically, though, it's a very effective way, and it's kind of cool. Sometimes you catch walleye and all kinds of stuff to go with it. If you got a lake that's got some other good species in there, like Dale and Cumberland both have pretty good walleye populations. So that's a good way to catch walleye also. But just for the guy who doesn't have a lot of electronics or zero electronics and wants to catch some fish for his family, that's not a bad way to go. So especially once you figure out if you get in the right area, typically speaking, they're going to be in June, they're going to be kind of funneling out towards the main lake. So you're going to be out there in the, towards the main lake. They may not be there yet. They could be anywhere from halfway back the creek to the main lake of a larger creek or the main river area. It's probably going to have fish basically, if you can find wherever the bait fish is at, and you can get in an area that's got a nice point or something, and you get out there and put your boat in 30 foot of water and put that light out, you'll probably be successful. You don't have to sit up over top of a brush pile or be over structure. You just need to be in an area where fish are consistently moving through that's got quite a bit of bait, and then you'll probably, have some production at night. Typically, if I was going to do that, you can fish jigs at night under lights, and that works some, but the best way is just to split shot in a minnow and just put a bunch of them, 5 or 6 rods out, sit there and watch them. It's a fun way, good way to take kids out. Catch a lot of different species and stuff too, so it's a fun way to fish. But not for everybody, but if you want a way that will probably work on about every lake, that is one way in the summertime, not to mention you get to get out of the heat. So that typically works pretty good on most lakes, at least in this area, until like July. Once that thermocline starts getting deeper and approaching like that 25 to 30 foot range, fishing under the light seems to kind of wane, and it gets harder, and those fish start relating more to the bottom. Then you're really going to have a hard time if you don't have Livescooe, because once those fish kind of get more bottom related or on the drop offs like on Del Hollow that they do, you really need that forward facing sonar to catch them. So then you better, if you don't have Livescooe, then you probably want to do something else, fish for something else for a while. And then fall, still pretty tough. They're pretty deep. When you get in the late fall, most lakes, they'll come back up shallow. Just depends on what kind of forage you got. A lot of people don't understand Dale and Cumberland, but they're two different beasts, because they, for some reason, there is some difference in the two lakes. But the fish on Dale really feed on those alewives, and in the fall they don't come up shallower. They just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And in the winter, right now, they're catching them like 50, 60 foot deep. And that's because that's where the alewives, that's where the bait's at. If you can go out there and look under these marinas right now, there'll be layers like 20, 30 foot thick of just alewives. And those crappie are right down there with them, and they're hard to catch. So, but that's fixing to change. And once we get a good warm rain, everything, kind of gets set up to where the warmest waters up in the creeks, then the fish will start to pull out of those deep water patterns, and we'll get into that pre-spawn. So that's kind of the whole different year. Let me show y'all how to tie a double rig. So when I'm pulling planter boards, I'm almost always targeting, I like to use double rigs unless the fish get really shallow. So it's a pretty easy thing to tie. So in general, in the pre-spawn, I'm gonna pull double 16ths. And then in the post-spawn period, just as a general rule, I'm gonna pull 2 1/8 ounce jigs. And because I'm gonna be targeted in that post-spawn pattern, I'm gonna be targeting fish in the anywhere from 10 to 20 foot range. And in the pre-spawn, I'm going 0 to 10. So I'll start off, basically, got my line, I got 4-pound SOS here. I got a jig here. I'm just gonna run it through the eye. And I tie this knot on those planter board videos too, so you can see it again there. And then I'm gonna go through my second jig, come back, and I've just got a double line. So, pretty easy, got a double line. I'm gonna just pinch it with this 2 fingers here. I'm gonna go around and make a loop. So I got a loop. I'm gonna go through the middle once, through the middle twice, through the middle one more time. So now, here's the trick. If you just sit there and cinch that down, my loop's gonna get too big. So first thing, I'm gonna wet it. And now, I'm just gonna put my fingers right here in front of that jig. And then I'm just gonna pull with my other hand the tag in like that. Pull it down tight. Now, this loop knot is, I haven't really emphasized the importance of this. But when I was on that first trip with my brother down to Weiss Lake, we'll talk about more in just a second. So I'll go ahead and tie the second one. So now what I've got is a loop, and you've got a jig that's completely freed up. So now I come up here on this other jig that's where I just move it up and down the line. I get my desired length there. I just pull back here a little bit. I got a double line again. I make that loop. I just go through the middle once, through the middle twice, through the middle one more time. Same thing, let it, pinch it here, and when that pinching it, that it keeps my loop the size that I want it. So now I've got another jig up here. So what that does is when you're pulling, there's no fixed point of attachment. It really frees that jig up. So when we were down there on that trip to Weiss Lake, learning how to long line troll for the first time, we were up there, we put in there a little river, went up there to, what was that creek called? Spring Creek. Every lake's got a spring creek. Well, that one does too. And that's where all the guides were. We got up there in the middle of the whole herd. I pretty much knew from the research I'd done, I had the right jigs. I was using those little jiffy jigs, and I was, going through there, and we were going the right speed. I think we caught 6 fish. So I got back to the dock that day, and there's this guy by the name of Jim Forrest. I don't know if Jim's still around, but he's a good dude. I had met him over here in Cumberland one time. And anyway, he asked, well, how'd you guys do? And I said, well, we caught a couple, but I said, we're missing something. And he looked at me and just kind of laughed. He goes, what knot are you tying? I go, well, I'm just tying a clinch knot, just like we always did when growing up. We tie a clinch knot on everything. It holds good. It's easy to tie. He says, all right. He told me to go watch this video. This is right about the time when the internet was just first, but they had the place we're staying in, they had the computers. We go look it up, and he said, look up, there was a video, I don't remember even who did it, said how to tie a loop knot. He said, look, watch that, learn how to tie that knot. And sure enough, I found the video. It took me about 30 minutes, learned how to tie this knot. I went out to the very exact place, same thing, everything, and I caught 100. The difference was 6 fish to 100 fish. And I was like, oh, it's crazy. So I've never tied a different knot. It doesn't matter, any kind of jig application, I'm tying a loop. And so that right there, if you're gonna pull jigs or troll or even cast, I always tie a loop knot. It's not particularly the strongest knot that you can have, but it is darn sure will get more bites than any other knot. And I can't really explain it, but all I can tell you is you'll never see me tie another knot if I'm fishing a jig. So, all right. So let's talk about, just got a few minutes left here. Look at all this paraphernalia on this table here. So for the guys, I've seen a couple of them that were on yesterday that said they're just now getting into crappie fishing. When you look at all this stuff, you're just like, what the heck, man? I don't know how to make heads or tails of it. Everything on here is a tool. So you just have to learn how to use the different tools and learn what they're for. Like that's the planter board. You got these little bitty bobbers. These are for like fishing during the spawn. You got a slip bobber here. This is Stan's PBS. Love this. This is a great thing to fish during the spawn. Fish with just a minnow under a slip bobber. That's a very effective way. Nothing wrong with that. I fish a slip bobber a lot in the summer when those fish get on the bottom and won't hardly chase a jig. A lot of my fish on my guide trips are caught on a slip bobber with the minnow. So it doesn't mean you're a lesser fisherman because you're using live bait. That's just, I'm going to use whatever catches the most fish for my clients. And a lot of the year, a minnow works really good. Personally, I don't really buy minnows in probably till July. From July till maybe October is when I'm going to fish with a minnow. In the spring, I'm never even going to buy them. In my opinion, there's no reason to buy a minnow in the spring, unless you're going to fish up shallow during the spawn. I think but that's still a good way to catch them. I just feel like I can catch them just as good or better on a jig, and I don't have to mess with trying to keep minnows. So, but certain times of year, definitely I'm a minnow fisherman, and I'm not going to apologize for it. So when I'm trolling, there's no reason to use a really expensive jig like this tungsten I hold. Great jig. Will it catch them trolling? Sure. There's not a lot of point in that. In fact, sometimes I like having that bigger hook. This double cross jig in like a 16th and an 1/8. This is pretty much all you need. Chartreuse is pretty much all I use when I'm trolling. It just works. Sometimes I'll mess around with a pink or lead, but generally speaking, chartreuse does fine. I'm either, like I said, in the pre-spawn, I'm targeting, I'm going to use double 16ths. I'm going to rig up like that in the morning. If I need to go shallower, this fish are 5 foot, if even I put like 10 foot of line behind that planter board, I'm going to be below them. So I'm going to cut that bottom jig off and just, I can go from a double to a single in a second. It's a 5-minute process to re-rig on each rod. So you're looking at 30-minute process to get all my jigs switched over from singles to doubles. So it's a whole lot quicker to go from doubles to singles. So I'm going to start off rigged for double jigs and then cut off that bottom one if I need to go shallower throughout the day. And typically speaking, though, as the day goes on in the pre-spawn spring, I'm going to go shallower throughout the day versus the other direction. Let's talk about the different profiles. So in the spring, when I'm pulling boards or long lining, one of my favorites, this is called a tiny dancer. It's got that paddle swim tail. I like that bait or even a hair jig. So from maybe like 50 to 53, I'm probably going to be pulling I'm going to probably have half and half. I'll probably put some of those little, and I don't have any of those little hair jigs, but you could put something like this Popeye. Crappie magnet has an eye hole little jig that works really good. There's 4 or 5 colors and they're all really nice for pulling. But this little tungsten eye hole Popeye would work great. Also when the water's cooler. But as it starts to warm into the 50s, but the tiny dancer is the profile I've really set on. But then as the water gets warmer and these fish get more active, they'll be more apt. And I'm going to tell you something here. This is a cool bait right here. This is called the Fin Spin Pro Series. And if you watch my stuff for a long time, when I first found out about these like 5 years ago, we just absolutely killed them. So this bait here, I really like the ones that have a gold blade, but in the low temperature range, they don't quite bite it as good. So when I'm going to be pulling fin spins is when the water gets above 53, like 53 and a half or up. That's when they'll really get aggressive enough to chase this. And then on the sunny days, that sun hitting that gold blade on a sunny day, and I got above 53 degree, like 53 to 58 degree water, this bait here is going to really shine. So the profiles I'm going to be pulling mainly are tiny dancers. It's a good size profile. It's got a great action when it's swimming that tail. And then in the post spawn, pretty much just I'll pull tiny dancers also in the post spawn, but this slab curly, that's when I'm going to be pulling this on the double 1/8 ounce setup. And it's just hard. This bait here is just great. Now, if you're fishing white crappie in the pre-spawn period, I would be pulling this too, because white crappie will be a whole lot easier. I'm not a crankbait guy. I don't like pulling crankbaits. Are they effective in the post-spawn? Very much. They will eat them up. But crankbaits cost a whole lot more, and I feel like my fish in particular will bite this slab curly 2 to 1 over a crankbait. So I pretty much know if I get that in the depth range where it needs to be and those fish see it, they're going to eat it. And they've yet to prove me wrong. I always use slab bites when I'm trolling. I'll put them, if I'm using eye holes, I'll put them in the eye hole, and I always keep them. And this is the time of year where I actually put them on the hook. I feel like they hang on to that bait a little bit longer when I have that scent on there. And that sometimes when they're just grabbing it and pulling back and letting go, as long as what I'm really looking at is I got to be able to get to that bait to grab that fish. And if it gets me another 2 seconds, that's all I need for my clients or me to get to that bait. If he's actively pulling it back and you grab that rod, you've got him. It's almost like a done deal. So the slab bites can really make a difference that time of year. That's the only time of year I really put them on the hook. I like to put them in the eye hole because it gives me like a nice visual contrast, especially like in the winter, like right now. But I usually don't put them on the hook itself. But every time I'm pulling in the spring, I've got jars of these. You can tell my boat's just speckled with where we stepped on them, but they're actually pretty easy to get out. You can hose them out. But so let's talk about profile and color. We haven't talked about color much. In the pre-spawn pattern, this is when color to me, in the pre-spawn and the post-spawn, when I'm trolling, color really, really matters. I'm going to prioritize color almost up there with profile in that time frame. And a lot of that is due to water clarity. So in the spring, in the pre-spawn, we're going to battle muddy water. Now, remember this. This is important. This is very important. Trolling in the spring is very effective, but the one thing that can just shut you down is muddy water. And it's going to happen. It's not an if. It's not a like. It's not an if it's going to happen. Is it going to muddy up this year? It's going to muddy up. You just have to be ready for it, and you're going to have to make an adjustment when it does happen. Used to be when the mud happened, I just canceled trips because we could go out there and pull all day and not catch any. If they can't see it in the pre-spawn and you're doing a trolling technique or any kind of technique, if they can't see the bait, they won't eat it. They can't see it, they can't find it. Which is funny is you think, well, those fish in Mississippi down there, it's muddy every day of the year down there. Like Grenada, it's never clear. When Dale Hollow gets as muddy as it can get, they're going to be like, well, that's just a normal color for Grenada. But you got to remember, those white crappie down there, they were born in that mud. If they didn't learn how to eat in the mud, they would starve. They would die. So they were born in the mud. These fish on Dale Hollow were born in the clear water. They really don't know what happens. Like, they don't really know what to do. What's interesting, what I found is, though, you can still catch them, but you cannot catch them trolling. So you have to, basically, if the areas that are holding the fish and the fish stay in that mud, you're going to have to go to a complete different presentation. And in that scenario, you are not going to be effective without Livescooe. So an open water fish in the mud is virtually impossible. I'm going to say impossible without forward-facing sonar. So that's why I'm not really going to talk about that too much, because I wanted to really keep this on point, and I've kind of diverged and been chasing cars a little bit here in different directions, but try to keep this focused on a perspective for a non-forward-facing sonar. And in the mud, you're in trouble. So we're just going to not talk about that. We can talk about that another time. So, but in the clear water, typically speaking, trolling is a very effective pattern. And when you're in the pre-spawn and the post-spawn, during the spawn, you don't need forward-facing sonar. You're just gonna have to cover enough targets and find an area, and just remember to try and keep your bait up in the water column, because those fish are going to be really shallow. A little jig and a cord. That's when where you can just take like a 12-foot rod or even longer if you want and dip around brush, because they're going to be super tight to stuff. And so that's what I would be doing during the spawn. Post spawn, once again, if I'm not going to I'm going to be trolling. That's really about it. So what I'm going to do is about trying to keep these to an hour. I went a little bit longer today. But got a ton of people on here. Yeah, Kirby said here, black slide bites inside chartreuse that does look just like every shad in the world. Match the hatch. That's a great point right there. And that's where the slide bites, where they do add scent, but I love the way they add like a nice visual accent. And I think they're just as important when I put them in that tungsten eye hole or the regular eye hole. I think I think like there's like that little black, and I really didn't think black slab bites were going to be that great of a thing, but they really are when you put them on a light color head, because it looks just like the eye or that little spot that those shad have on there. And I think a lot of times, even in lower water clarity conditions, they can they see that dark spot and they know that, they think, well, that's a shad, and they're just going to hammer it. So yes, good tip, Kirby. So I'm going to put up both those trolling videos. here in just a second. And then that'll kind of give you guys a really, I mean, those videos will illustrate a whole lot more than me just sitting there trying to explain the technique. You'll just do it better seeing it. So give those a look. That one with Kirby and Denny that's one of my highlights of my guide career is watching Denny catch that fish. So you can see, when you watch it, you'll see we were pretty jacked up. But guys, that's really about all I got. So we'll be down in Knoxville. I do want to talk about something. So Ron Wong Foundation. Ron Wong, I don't know, a lot of you guys know him, a lot of you might not, but Ron Wong was very influential in helping me get started guiding. He was one of my when I first got started, he was one of the guys that really helped encourage me and give me some good ideas. And so thought the world of that guy. He was my buddy. Well, he passed away suddenly. But anyway, we've started a foundation, or they have started a foundation, and I'm blessed to help out, try and raise money. The proceeds from the Ron Wong Foundation are going to go to getting women and young people involved in fishing, which is what we got to do. We got to keep getting younger. We got to bring as many women into the sport as we can too. So, Brush Pile Academy, look at that. So that's basically, if this kind of stuff is helping, this is what I do in the seminars at the Brush Pile Academy, except then we take this would be like a classroom seminar. Then we would take it to the water and put all this to work on the water. It's an amazing experience. They've got several of them. I'll post a link to that too. But they have an academy on Green River in the spring, and the Ron Wong Foundation is supporting that. So they're going to offer scholarships. And if we raise enough money, everybody will be able to, it's going to be for women and young people only. They're going to limit it to that. And the goal is to offer scholarships to everybody. And so, that being said, those people should be able to come free to charge if we can do, and we've already raised a lot of money, we just need a little bit more. So, I have donated a trip, and so has David Jones on Green River. There's going to be more details. We should have the details finalized and I'll have something to post by the end of the week. And you'll be able to and they're going to sell raffles to these trips. So you're going to get a full day guided with me. Lodging will be included, and the same thing on Green River. And I think they're going to sell raffle tickets for like $50 a chance, but you're going to win. I mean, whoever wins is going to get a trip on Green with David, and then a trip with me. And everything will be covered. And basically, how you'll register for that is you'll go to the Ron Wong Foundation page, and you can pay right there, and then you put on there, a description, raffle for the guided trips, and then they're going to draw that out. So the guys that, I'm not going to be at the Columbus show this year, but all you guys up in Ohio are going to be at the Columbus, Ohio show. Check out the Brush Pile booth. They'll be selling tickets there for that, but it's for a great cause. Ron Wong was a special dude, and we're going to keep his memory alive. So, that being said, I'll be in Knoxville this weekend. I don't know what this weather is going to do. Jay Jackman posted it's the Ron Wong Legacy Foundation, and I'll post some more stuff to my page with regard to that. Gary Camp's on there. The academies are amazing, guys. This is where you get to learn from the best instructors on the planet. Like Steve Coleman. That guy's been an inspiration for me since I was a kid. He's 8-time national champion. So when I don't understand something, I'll call Steve and I can ask him, and he can tell me, because he spent more time diving under the water than I've ever spent fishing. So he's just my reference. And just like that, I can be your guys' reference. But, once you come to the academy, it's all focused on just the love crappie and helping you guys catch more fish. So we're going to have an academy on Dale Hollow, in the fall, same time as we had it last year. I'll post some stuff about that too. I'll keep a bunch of stuff coming up here. But, yeah, those are all going to fill up this year. Kirby's got one out in Kansas for the first time. That's going to be super cool. Fortunately, I won't be able to instruct at that one, but that is going to be really cool to see a whole different area of the country get the experience the way we teach. So basically on the academies, it's lodging, everything's included. You show up, like usually Wednesday night. Thursday we'll do seminars in the morning or afternoon, however the weather works out, and then we go onto the water. So it's two participants and one instructor. So you're getting like a 5-6 hour session, and I get to throw as many of this stuff, and then you actually do get screamed at, like Jay and all these other guys have got to experience. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And it's an amazing thing. So everybody, if you really want to get into, especially you guys on here that are just now getting into crappie fishing, that is a great way to get you like a couple years down the curve in like 3 days. So usually on a Thursday, we do seminars, and then you get to fish for half the day. On Friday, we do seminars again, you get to fish half the day. And then usually, a lot of times on Saturdays, we're doing 2 sessions where you're getting to spend like 10 hours on the water. So pretty awesome stuff, guys. I highly encourage you to check out the Brush Pile Academy. Please help us to support Ron Juan Foundation. This is going to keep our sport growing. Check out all the videos and stuff I put up. If you got a chance, come down and see me in Knoxville. The weather, I don't know what this storm's going to do. I'll definitely looks like I'll be able to get Friday in down there. And hopefully, as long as we don't get a foot of snow, I'll be there all day Saturday and hopefully Sunday. But guys, it's been great talking with y'all. Send me some comments. I want to learn how to make these better. So just I can handle it. If you got something you don't like, tell me. I'll try to make it. If I can adjust it, I will. The next one of these I'm going to do is on next Thursday, and we're going to go over tackle organization. And in the meantime, if you guys think of more topics, just throw them in the comments there. All right, guys, I'm going to get out of here. I got a bunch of stuff to do. It's good talking to you, and we'll see you on the water. Sore lip them all.